Good morning. As you most likely have now guessed, we will be sitting with the very beginning this morning. And I know that while these verses from Genesis probably ring as clearly and distinctly in our minds as any other, simply because we've heard them so many times, rarely do we hear it all together, the whole story from beginning to end. So I'm going to offer that to us today in a slightly different version in the Common English Bible. And I invite you to hear it for what it is, the story and of creation. This is Genesis 1 through chapter 2, verse 4. When God began to create the heavens and the earth was without shape or form. It was dark over the deep sea, and God's wind swept over the waters. God said, "Let there be light." And so light appeared. God saw how good the light was. God separated the light from the darkness. He named the light day and the darkness night. There was evening and there was morning, the first day. God said, "Let there be a dome in the middle of the waters to separate the waters from each other." God made the dome and separated the waters under the dome from the waters above the dome. And it happened that way. God named the dome sky. There was evening and there was morning, the second day. God said, "Let's fill the waters into the sea, sky. Let the waters come under the sky, come together into one place so that the dry land can appear." And that's what happened. God named the dry land earth and named the gathered watered seas, and God saw how good it was. God said, "Let the earth grow plant life, plants yielding seeds and fruit trees bearing fruit with seeds inside it, each according to its kind throughout the earth." And that's what happened. The earth produced plant life, plants yielding seeds, each according to its kind, and trees bearing fruit with seeds inside it, each according to its kind. God saw how good it was. There was evening and the morning, the third day. God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night. They will mark events, sacred seasons, days, and years. The lights will be in the dome of the sky to shine on the earth." And that's what happened. God made the stars and two great lights, the larger light to rule over the day and the smaller to rule over the night. God put them in the dome of the sky to shine on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, to separate the light from the darkness. God saw how good it was. There was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. God said, "Let the waters swarm with living things, and let birds fly above the earth in the dome of the sky." God created great sea animals and tiny living things, the swarm of the waters, each according to its kind, and winged birds, each according to its kind. God saw how good it was. Then God blessed them. "Be fertile and multiply and fill the waters of the sea, and let the birds multiply on the earth." There was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. God said, "Let the earth produce every kind of living thing, livestock, crawling things, and wildlife." And that's what happened. God made every kind of wildlife, every kind of livestock, every kind of creature that crawls on the ground. God saw how good it was. And God said, "Let us make humanity in our own image." to resemble us so that they may take charge of the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, all the earth, and all the crawling things on the earth. God created humanity in God's own image. In the divine image, God created them, male and female, God created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fertile and multiply, fill the earth and master it. Take charge of the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and everything crawling on the ground." Then God said, "Now I give to you all the plants of the earth that yield seeds, and all the trees whose fruit produces seeds within it. These will be your food. To all the wildlife, the birds of the sky, and everything crawling on the ground, to everything that breathes, I give all green grasses for food." And that's what happened. God saw everything he had made. It was supremely good. There was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. The heavens and the earth and all who live in them were completed. On the sixth day, God completed all the work he had done, and on the seventh day, God rested from all the work that he had done. God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all the work of creation. This is the account of the heavens and the earth as they were created. Our origins matter. We know this to be true. It's the backstory that creates who we are and makes the story from there rich and rewarding. Spider-Man was importantly bitten by a radioactive spider. That's what starts the whole super strength web slinging, swing off of buildings thing. But I dare say that that's not the important bit of his origin story. And sure, it gives us a whole new section of the catalog to pick from when we're thinking, what superpower would I like to have? Yeah, I can make spider webs. Awesome. But what made Spider-Man Spider-Man is actually the part of the story where Peter Parker is becoming a superhero and he experiences loss that he is utterly powerless to stop or contain. He loses his father figure in his Uncle Ben, who teaches with his final breath that with great power comes greater responsibility. That's what makes the story and the rest of the whole universes that spring from it worth pondering and considering. That change in the beginning changes everything else. Without that moral, difficult lesson, the whole story unspools quite differently. Now, this ends my excursion into graphic novel universes. I promise. But the same is true for how we organize our world and our lives. Our origin stories matter a great deal. It positions us within time and space. It tells the way that the world was created. And if you go around and read different stories, often they have a different way of telling it that is intrinsic to that culture in that time. Because this is where you set out how the world was meant to be constructed. And oftentimes what you'll find is these stories take great pains to explain how the gods did what they do and set out the logic of the way that the world is, usually connecting the king to the gods in the divine right to rule. That's the created order, not just the way things are. Most accounts of creation divide this divine power in ways where the gods rely on other semi-gods, known as the aristocracy, that help them to keep the world from literally falling apart. One case in point would be the Enuma Elish from ancient Babylon. The story is often held up against the biblical witness of creation because they're so close in time and space. Both of them start with water swirling and a confusion, and then a creating being bringing something out of it. But from there, it departs wildly. Because in Babylonian creation, there is a giant cosmic battle where the earth is the vanquished foe, split in two to create the world. And the God, who just so happens to share the name of the king, is the one who does the splitting. The very creation establishes why Babylon is supposed to be what it is and rule from the whole of the ancient Near East. All of which is to say, I don't think we quite appreciate how unique the Yahweh creation story is, so very different and unique. We're utterly familiar with it, and its rhythms are there so much so that we take it for granted. The first day, the second day, day and evening, and below it was good. I'm guessing that in all my reading there, you probably even zoned out a bit. I'm fairly realistic about that. Because you've known it all before. But I think between our familiarity and also in the way that we have worked with this scripture in trying to wrap our heads around where does science end and faith begin, and how does it work, and how do the timelines are there or not there, we miss what it says about the created world, and most importantly, what it says about God along the way. And that is what I think is really important and really part of what's here. And looking at this week's sermon, I came across an article I clipped from the Christian Century all the way back in 2018. It was written by Rabbi Shai Held, and it tickled my imagination here. So I'll really say that I owe a great deal of the ideas here to Rabbi Held as I step into this. The story of 6 days and rest and pronouncing it all good is so well part of our world and our upkeeping that we don't think about the narrative that it creates. Yahweh creates a moral universe for us to inhabit with its meaning about nature and creation and how you and I are created to be within it. And it also says about something about God. And some of this pushes us in important ways. I want to start here and take us back to verse 26 and 27. I have a slide ready to go. This is where God comes and creates humanity. God says, we are giving the image of God to all humanity, to all people, to all places. And then the next verse, and then created them both in male and female all the way. What God is creating here in all humanity is the image of God, is the image of Yahweh within us. But let's step back and take that image and do it a different way. Let's learn from the neighbors and say, who is made in the image of God? Well, the neighbor creation stories would say, well, that's the king. So here, the king was made in the image of God so he could rule over all the people. Here, we are made in the image of God. So what does that make us? Maybe in this story, we all are the kings and queens appointed to be part of the universe that God makes. Every last one of us. It puts a very different spin on things. We all are there. Similarly, many ancient Near East texts often speak within the creation of the rise of the nation being the ultimate end of creation. But that's not what the Bible does. Genesis leaves us with the creation of Adam and Eve. Abraham and the promise to Israel is nowhere yet in evidence. There's no establishment of the land and the proper right to rule. The nation arises not from the creation intent of God from the very beginning, but God's intent for the nation to bless the whole world out of the relationship with God that is yet to come. Even more so, later in Genesis, Yahweh embraces a multitude of thoughts and actions and ways of being, even down to making it happen through the Tower of Babel. No matter what you think of that particular story, it can't be made into the God of the universe picking one group over the other, but rather the whole world is seen as one. All of this means that the whole of creation from the very beginning is constructed around God's good plan to be at the business of creating a world first, not a system of power and governance. This is part of what makes the Judeo-Christian vision a different one. The spirit of Genesis 1 goes out in all its ways to relate all the people one to the other. Adam, the literal son of the earth, as Adam is most literally translated as earthman from the Hebrew, brings us all together. The rabbinic tradition holds that Yahweh created Adam singularly so that no one may say to the other, my father was greater than your father. Just as theologically speaking, we're all descended from one father, so humanly speaking, we all descend from one father. And biblically speaking, racism and bigotry and all the forms are indicative of a brazen denial of God as creator of all. The text goes out of its way to stress that male and female, God created them. So the disconnect also applies to sexism as well. God creates us in God's image, and as such we are invested with the power of the living God and the responsibilities that implies. Now just imagine, if you would, what would it be like if we approached our creation and our origin story in this way, in the fullest way possible. It would really change some of our assumptions that are realized consciously or no in our daily lives. How might our world work if we far more routinely would remember that every person, every last one, is the image of God before us, regardless of class, race, creed, or station. Moreover, to take the logic offered up by Genesis, they are created in the image of God, and as such, they are very kings and queens that the other theologies put at the very top. The whole of creation places at its center the worth and dignity of the universe simply because it's a reflection of the one who made it. And at the end of all the other ways and means of arguing, I think it is far more impactful of a lesson for us to take out of the story of creation. Because it sets up a way of living biblically in the world that is far more revolutionary than things that are generally. If we would try to live out this king and queenness, we would see the world differently. And as it always needs to be said, that would be a challenge of epic proportions. As is always the case, you need to be careful reading the Bible. You never quite know where it might sweep you off to. Of course, we are a very long way from such a world and such a vision. We know that we struggle to see people as God sees them, to lay aside the valuations of people that we attach to them without even being fully aware that we do so. We know that too often we use our religion to reinforce our stereotypes, if not anchor them in the absolute truth, rather than to allow the creating spirit of God to dismantle all that would blind and divide us. We know that the world as it is and as it was created is fallen, far from what it was meant to be. But there's also a challenge to come back to time and again and to continue the work that is done here. Because there's another question rising out of this king and queenship that we were given in Genesis. Because if we are kings and queens, we then need to answer, well, what's the responsibility of a good leader? And certainly in there, the measure of a just leader is their power to defend the poor, the widow, and the orphan. In other words, to do for the people who don't fit within a structure of family, clan, and class, and to make sure that they too have a place. The monarch had to take on the others being responsible for them as a central function of their responsibilities. It was the way the world is supposed to work. So the moral responsibility resides in the ones vested in the image of God. Then what is our responsibility to work with the ways that the world so resolutely remains broken? How do we carry this broadly spread moral responsibility for the way that justice is in the world, in God's world, in a world where justice has meted out so sparingly? How might we occupy this role better, lending our weight to this ever-present need? Now, I'll readily say, this is probably not what you showed up to hear. And it's probably a good deal headier and philosophical than you might be ready for. But chew on it if you would. See what you make of it. And come back to the story of creation that gives you what you need and calls you beyond itself. Because, my friends, we have been created good. And we can rest in the God who created us. May this God whose glory shows within us all creature us, comfort us, and inspire us to what God is bringing to pass even now and even today. Amen.